Hello.
Our story begins inside Padme's apartment. She was sleeping and Anakin was wide awake. His nightmares from the previous night were running rampant on his mind. He wanted someone to talk to, but he didn't want to wake his very pregnant wife, and there was no point in contacting someone at the temple, because why would he be calling someone inside the temple if he was supposed to be inside of it? Didn't make sense realistically, so whoever he contacted needed to be someone far from the planet. But who did he trust enough to talk to? Quinlan Voss was out on Boz Pity, so surely there was a conversation there. But even by Anakin's standards, Master Voss was a little too wild. He considered Master Balaba, but she was on Kaller with her student Caleb Doom. No reason to distract her. After all, she had stepped down from the council so she could focus on his training. Anakin's eyes were heavy. He was tired. Last night's sleep, aside from the night terrors, was the best sleep he'd had in months, and yet he was yearning to sleep again. Padme's bed was comfortable, and her by his side was perfection in his mind. But he couldn't lay down right now. There was something troubling him, and something about Master Yoda's conversation from earlier in the day rubbed him the wrong way. Anakin walked out to the edge of the balcony and looked down at the passing speeders. He then considered someone super close, because who else could he contact aside from Master Plo? He readied the communication device and then wondered if this was the right course of action. He decided against his better judgment and contacted the Jedi Master on Cato Neimoidia. Master Plo was in a deep slumber when his communication device bursted alive. He rose up with readiness, preparing to rush out the door of his chambers inside the Venator and for another battle to begin on the planet. But no, instead of hearing Commander Wolf or Captain Jag, it was Anakin Skywalker. Why was he reaching out to him? Plo asked Anakin what was wrong and if he was alright. Anakin nodded his head, as if Plo could see him, but then he found his voice. He spoke softly and quietly. The buzz of the Coruscant skyline behind him drowned out his voice, and Master Plo told him he needed to speak up. Anakin apologized and restarted, asking Plo how was he doing. Plo was silent for a moment, and then told Anakin that he was well rested, asking why he was up at this hour of the evening and if he was okay again. Anakin stood silently. The hum of the speeders and traffic poured through the microphone on his end. Plo listened and waited, before asking if he was still there. He could sense that Anakin was very hesitant about this conversation, which led to him being even more confused about why it was starting to begin with. Obi-Wan was on Coruscant. He might be the most appropriate individual to handle this kind of a conversation, especially since it would be in person. Plo was obviously assuming that Anakin was inside the temple. Skywalker eventually got the courage to tell Plo that his mind was clouded. He was confused and worried, and he had a conversation with Yoda earlier in the day that left him feeling empty. He didn't want to feel that way, and he believed that Yoda had led him down the wrong path, and he was simply seeking some sort of knowledge or comfort. Plo listened and rubbed his head, asking for Anakin to repeat the conversation. It truthfully wasn't his place to know, and he honestly didn't really want to know, because it was a private conversation, should stay between two individuals. But Plo also believed that Anakin had completely misinterpreted the conversation or the message intended by Yoda. It happened to all of them. At one point, Plo was an adolescent and consulted the Grand Master. He too, like many of his peers and even Anakin, were left in confusion. Yet as the conversation went on, Plo realized that the misinterpretation took a lot of word bending on Skywalker's side. Yoda's point was clear and concise, even without having the context of who Anakin had visions of losing. Plo explained that death was a natural part of life, and Yoda had now seen every single one of his students die, Dooku being the last of them. Not a single one of his masters were still alive, and again, with Dooku's death, he had seen the last of his pupils pass on to the Force. The Grand Master was wise, but he wasn't going to just lead Anakin astray for no reason. He was suggesting that Anakin learn to not focus on controlling what could not be controlled. If it were Ahsoka in the vision, then he needed to trust that she would use his training to survive against the likes of Darth Maul. If it were Master Kenobi, then he needed to believe that Obi-Wan would use his wit and strength to persevere. And if it were anyone else close to him, he needed to see that the Force works in mysterious ways. It was a message continuously noted by the Council, and it was one that often remained true. The Force would tell individuals about the future, but going out of one's way to prevent it could even encourage it to happen. Plo reminded Anakin of Master Sifo Dyas' decision to create the clone army. Did he encourage the war to happen, or did he stop it from happening? He too had a vision, and in hindsight, while all the Jedi were grateful for their brothers in the clone army, was it the right decision to create a clone army? He attempted to control the flow of time, and time itself, like the Force, could not be bent into one's own personal fixations, beliefs, or wishes. It must be allowed to transpire, whether or not he agreed with it. Anakin seemed frustrated even after all of this. While Plo gave him more concise answers, it bordered on the same lines as Yoda's response. Sensing this, Plo believed that Anakin didn't call in relation to his conversation with Master Yoda. It was a distraction so he could build up the courage to say something else. He was starting to think that Anakin was concerned with his mission to spy on the Chancellor. Perhaps there was more to this conversation, so Plo spoke again, asking Anakin what was truly burdening him. Because he could sense the weight on Anakin's mind, the silence and the lack of response was telling him that there was more to be said. Anakin stuttered and then found the words he wanted to get out, explaining that he felt as if he were being pulled in two different directions. Tonight, he went to the opera and he was told about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. He explained that the nature of this individual seemed more reliable than the path that was proposed by Yoda, and it left him confused. He told Plo that he didn't want to rely on darkness, and he didn't want to be led down the wrong path. The Jedi Master was left to assume that Palpatine was the one that told him the story of Plagueis the Wise. As a Sith legend, with a name like Plagueis, likely referred to as Sith, obviously. Plo said that Anakin's heart was in the right place, but he had to look deeper into what seemed surface level, and stop searching for answers in what really was simplicity. Anakin thought quietly and asked if he was referring to the mission. Plo let out a small giving Anakin a chance to think things over for a moment as they sat on the call. Young Skywalker asked if this mission had a purpose outside of just spying on the Chancellor. Plo didn't respond as Anakin continued talking out his thoughts, suggesting that maybe it was also a test for him. Plo still remained silent, as Anakin started to realize that there was more to this mission than he initially thought. The Jedi could see Palpatine as a Sith, but more importantly, they wanted to see if he was truly loyal to the Jedi. Plo broke his silence and told Anakin that his instincts guided him well. He needed to trust them more than the words of those trying to hurt him. So Plo asked Anakin why he hadn't spoken to Master Windu about this. Anakin shrugged, explaining that he didn't want anyone to get hurt. If Palpatine knew a Sith legend, it didn't mean he had to be a Sith. Well, what did Anakin's instincts tell him? Anakin stumbled and murmured that potentially Palpatine was trying to pull him away from the Jedi with quick solutions to questions that weren't answered the way he wanted. Plo asked if Anakin was able to figure out how Palpatine would know about his previous conversation with Yoda. Anakin thought back and realized that Palpatine just told him about a Sith Lord who had the ability to save others from death without any motive at all. Anakin said coincidence, and Plo said Skywalker's name with a disappointed tone. He reminded Anakin of their most basic lessons. The dark side takes. Think about what it did to Dooku. A shiver ran down Anakin's spine. Think about what it made him do to Dooku. He decapitated him with no mercy, and that was not the Jedi way. And that was also encouraged by Palpatine. Plo told Anakin, without hearing that last part, that he couldn't be on Coruscant due to his mandate to be here at this crucial juncture for the Separatists within the core. But if he had any more questions, and didn't feel comfortable with anyone else on the council, then he was just a call away. Plo asked if there was anything else that Anakin had to talk about, and there wasn't, before he thanked the Jedi Master. Plo nodded and wished that the Force be with his young friend for the duration of his mission. Anakin was left confused following the call, because Plo didn't seem in a rush to inform anyone of what Anakin had said. It was a simple lesson in trust, because the Jedi Master believed that Anakin would tell the Council about what he learned. And if not the Council, then surely he would say something to Master Windu in the morning. However, Plo, on the other side, couldn't go back to sleep now, so he'd spend the rest of the night wide awake, waiting until he could do something. Anakin did have some more nightmares, but they wouldn't translate into action the following day. He still felt at odds with his mission to spy on the Chancellor, so instead he only revealed the important details of General Grievous's location. However, during the morning before the session with the Council, he and Padme had breakfast together, and he told her about some of it. He didn't specify anything because she didn't need to get into trouble over it if he was caught. But she explained that, to her, it sounded like the Council was seeing if he was worthy of a promotion. He asked if she meant the rank of Master, and she responded quickly with, yeah. Like, how did he not see what this had to be? They reject Palpatine's appointment, then appoint him themselves. Then they decide to give him a very important secret mission, one that's so secret that he, her husband, couldn't tell her? It sounded like they were testing him to see if he was truly worthy of serving on their council. Maybe he needed to look at things a little differently. But she fully believed that this mission was meant to challenge him, to see if he was ready for the rank of Master. He was, according to him, already the youngest Jedi to serve on the council, so surely this was to affirm the council's decision to put him in their ranks. She encouraged him to remain mentally strong. This would all be worth it in due time. She promised that much. Anakin realized that just talking things out helped him grapple with the intensity of the situation he was in. He remained optimistic during the council session that would assign Obi-Wan to Utapau, and he didn't feel an ounce of frustration about not joining him. He and his master had worked with each other on several missions, but it wasn't the most uncommon thing for them to be spread out. Plus, what was the point of sending the 501st and 212th if one division could be saved for reserve? Anakin came to see this as a strategic play as well. If there was another separatist fleet, army, or stronghold, then his division would be the first to go. It was very simple. Obi-Wan had the most experience with General Grievous. It wasn't that the council distrusted him, it was that they wanted to win the war now, not drag it out for another couple months. While Anakin continued to neglect the Plagueis the Wise story, Plo had more or less assumed that Anakin told Master Windu. His advice to have Anakin tell the Master of the Order was because Plo trusted that Anakin would show the Council that he was worthy of the rank of Master. Between talking with Plo and Padme, Skywalker started to see what he should have been seeing the entire time. The Jedi were trying to help him find his success. They were pushing him towards the finish line, but he kept getting off the train and walking backwards. Directly after the Council session, he would get into contact with Master Plo Koon again. He was surprised to see that Anakin had contacted him. He was even more surprised to learn that Anakin didn't tell a soul about Plagueis the Wise. Plo didn't scold him, just asked why. Anakin's excuse was that he didn't have time. That was an obvious lie, so Plo asked for the real answer, and the truth is, Anakin was afraid to tell the truth. The Jedi Master knew what this meant, and he didn't press it further, so he instructed Skywalker to go to his quarters inside the temple. There, he would find holocrons that would make things easier for him. Anakin did just that, and listened to the holograms, due to Plo needing to return to his siege at Cato Neimoidia. Some of these recordings would handle grief, as Plo had dealt with it extensively after his master passed away in his arms. It wasn't something that made Anakin feel a whole lot better, but Plo thought it would. He was hoping that Anakin would come to grapple with what he couldn't control, and therefore control what he could control, like his actions. Instead, it made Anakin even more hesitant to tell Windu about Plagueis. Following a very heartwarming interaction with Obi-Wan by the shipyards, Anakin would visit the Chancellor, who expressed his desire to see Anakin to see the Jedi distrusting him. It was slowly becoming more and more clear that Palpatine wanted the Jedi to be seen as enemies within Anakin's perspective. But with his first conversation with Plo being so important and effective, he believed that the Jedi weren't his enemies. Anakin was fully capable of handling this on his own, but he wasn't sure of who to trust anymore. He felt that way until Palpatine referred to Padme by her imminent death. He was a little flabbergasted, somehow, and pulled his lightsaber on the Chancellor, before leaving to inform the Council about this development, one that could have been solved following the opera. Anakin, as per Windu's request, would wait in the Council chambers, where he would start to hear voices. Palpatine continued to express that Anakin needed him. Without Palpatine's knowledge, Padme would be consumed and killed, so instead of immediately leaving again, he tried to consult a hologram of Plo's. The topic of death was still the focus of the holocron, so Anakin tried to call Plo one final time. The holocrons weren't helping with the voices, and Plo again answered. This time he was on the surface. They were about to win, but the sound of lightsabers and blaster fire could be heard. Plo asked Skywalker what it was that he needed, and Anakin told him that there were voices in his head telling him to go and save somebody, to go and save Palpatine. Plo actually had to pause on the battlefield because he was so bewildered that this was even a question. He was able to assume that Windu told him to remain in the council chambers, which is exactly what Plo would have done. So now, he had to tell Anakin that no, you can't go gallivanting across the city because an evil dude was speaking into his head. Plo, who was usually known for his composure, raised his voice, before dropping it again. He told Anakin to not go over there. If he was ordered to not leave the chambers, then why would he risk it? What was the purpose? Stop with the nonsense and stay put. An explosion ended the call as Plo returned to combat a little frustrated. To hear someone like Plo lose his cool made Anakin really think things through. He realized that maybe he had gone too far with this thing. Anakin decided to cut the middleman out. He honestly needed to move around and get out of the chamber because he felt like he was suffocating inside of it. So he would go to Padme's residence to get some fresh air. Skywalker moved to his ship and ventured across the city, away from the executive building to Padme's residence, so he didn't have to worry about what Windu was doing. When he arrived at the apartment, something was awry. He rushed in and called out her name, but he could hear his ship speeding away. Anakin leapt into his own ship and launched off, finding a shuttle that was clearly carrying her. He tried to be careful with this, so he fired a shot that clipped one of the 4 engines on the vessel, meaning it wouldn't have the full power to climb out of the atmosphere. Whoever captured Padme would be forced to land somewhere on the surface. Anakin's thoughts about Palpatine, Plo, the Jedi, or the Sith vanished. This was the only thing that mattered to him, so he continued his chase with rapid speed. The shuttle sped between traffic lines and eventually found itself home at a landing pad on a luxury hotel. Anakin leapt out of his starfighter, allowing gravity to decide its fate, as he slammed down before the ramp of the ship. Padme was being escorted into the hotel by 6 royal guards and an individual wearing a temple guard uniform, but without the helmet. The Pa'un man ignited his pike and told Skywalker that it ended right here. Surrender and join the new empire. Anakin's face scrunched up as anger filled his body. He felt rage unlike ever before in his life, and his hand reached forward, stopping the 6 royal guards in their tracks and yanking them forward. He used the force to gently move Padme inside the doors as he slammed them shut. His saber ignited, and he told the Imperial loyalists that they would die before their new order could ever be born. He spun his lightsaber as 2 of the royal guards tried to break into the doors. Padme on the inside was escorted away, being that the hotel staff recognized her as a senator of Naboo. Anakin collided with the Grand Inquisitor, ducking his strike and kicking him backwards, as he used the force on the 2 guards trying to break into the hotel and lobbing them off the platform on either edge, leading them to spiral down towards their deaths. His saber jabbed forward as the other royal guards moved in. Their pikes jabbed at his body, but he moved away quickly. Anakin was in his element. All the tension he felt throughout the day, and especially in the council chambers, made him a tangled up animal. Now he was a Rathdar on the loose. He blocked his opponents, who outnumbered him, defending where he could, grabbing one of the guards by the throat and shattering the armor plating and crushing their windpipe with the use of his metallic hand, as he dragged his saber across the platform, slamming it through another guard before driving his weapon behind his back to stop the Inquisitor. Anakin threw the lifeless guard from his hand, spinning his saber behind his back and colliding with the fallen Jedi. He sped forward, forcing the Inquisitor to quickly bat his saber up in defense. As he did, the pike of a royal guard lodged itself in Anakin's shoulder, right beneath the shoulder blade. Anakin whipped back around, crushing their body under a thick strike that looked painful. Anakin then pulled back, defending himself as he planted his feet and readied himself. His anger made everything blurry to him, but he focused on his action. He drove his saber through the Inquisitor's pike, which split into 2 halves. The Inquisitor batted at the Jedi Knight, but he couldn't stop him. The Inquisitor was holding on with everything he had left before the final strike disarmed him. Anakin scrunched his face up, pulling the saber above his head. The Grand Inquisitor's body was half off the platform and only being held up by Anakin's weight on his torso, where one of his boots was planted. Grand Inquisitor begged for mercy, but Anakin shook his head, driving his blade down as aggressively as he could, extinguishing his pitiful little life in an instant. Just as his life ended, Master Coleman Kaj contacted him, asking him where he was. Anakin explained the situation, and the Jedi Master thanked him before ending the call. Windu had finished off the Sith Lord inside of the executive building. He tried calling Anakin, but instead requested Coleman to find him. Shakti and Sindralik would help Mace with cleaning up their little execution. Palpatine didn't surrender, electrocuted himself, and then tried to flee when he was then killed by Windu. The Master of the Order would handle all of it from here, and he was going to ask Anakin to come and help, where he would give him the rank of Master. But due to his sidetracked mission, it'd have to wait. Padme wasn't able to see the fight, but she was glad that Anakin was alright. They would go to the medical facility across the city together. She would give birth a little earlier due to the stress of the whole kidnapping thing, and he'd have his shoulder blade healed up. It would otherwise be the perfect time for the 2 of them, as if nothing in the galaxy really mattered, and at the moment, it didn't. Chaos would come in the Senate chambers in the weeks that followed. but the Jedi would make a good case to defend themselves. In the situation where Palpatine won, he was able to speak for people that could not defend themselves. The same was the inverse here, and the Jedi used evidence from earlier in the war against Palpatine, essentially blaming Sheev for knowing about Dooku's involvement in the creation of the clone army. The revelation of this information came with Obi-Wan's defeat of Grievous. The way it was phrased was Grievous told Obi-Wan before his death, as a way to barter for his life, but he was destroyed for being too dangerous to be kept alive. The Senate actually bought it, which was kind of ironic, but they had nothing to disprove of it aside from the fact that the Pikes knew about Tyrannus' involvement. It was a whole thing. But he could be scapegoated so the Jedi wouldn't take the brunt of the problem. Mace, Shak Ti, and Sindralic perfectly countered the would-have-been rise to Palpatine's regime. They were even able to use Grand Inquisitor as proof that he was trying to frame the Jedi for unspeakable actions. The way the entire situation became seen as was Palpatine turned Dooku into an ally so he could manipulate the war into his favor, which didn't really help with how the Separatists viewed the Republic. The following political landscape would be a truce and an end of combat, with a 5-year plan to reintroduce the Confederacy and the Neutral Systems Coalition into the Republic. The Jedi would be seen as the heroes, because they wrote the script for how they would and should be viewed in the aftermath. Plo Koon would still be very flustered with Anakin's behavior, but he wouldn't bring it up upon his return. Anakin would receive his rank of Master, but he would have to leave to escort the Senator of Naboo away from Coruscant. The outcry over Palpatine and her kidnapping would convince the Jedi to keep her away from the capital for the time being that they were both from Naboo. But it would be the perfect way for both parents to raise Luke and Leia away from the Order. It would then be decided by the parents to raise their children as Jedi. Luke and Leia would be returned to the Jedi Order with their father after a 3-month hiatus. It was a tough decision, but they wanted Luke and Leia to be trained within the temple with all their extra studies, and then, when they turned 13, they would be removed from the Jedi Order so they could follow their own paths. Anakin would remain a Master on the High Council for those same 13 years, before leaving the Order to live out his life with his wife and children on Naboo. Padme stayed in the Senate until the Confederacy merged with the Republic. She would return to Naboo to help with local politics, following the complete chaos that followed after Palpatine's betrayal was discovered by the wider galaxy. Padme's work in both the Galactic Senate and the local politics of Naboo would give the people of her home world the recognition for what they actually represented. So by the time she was replaced by Jar Jar, their reputation had been saved. For now. Anakin and Padme would live out their lives peacefully on Naboo, vacationing with their children, the politician and the racer. It would be a good life, and while Anakin may have flustered Plo during the Neimoidian campaign, he was one of the few Jedi who knew about this family, and he supported them with all of his heart. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to the patrons: General Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Jack Silver, Prismatic Warlock Master, Lyndall Asher, Schmoobs, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, General Alexander, Robin Roberts, Alexander Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fett Clone, Nick5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Grandaddy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark McDory, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewoo670, Anifesh Tank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Saints of Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calig, Youngly66, Madman Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Photos Like Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The Man with 3 First Names, Darkseid46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button. Sith Clone Wars out this weekend, go check it out. Otherwise, let's talk about this story. So, talking about your problems is a really good way to solve them. And Anakin learns that here. That's pretty much like, it's always fun kind of changing these scenarios up. I actually really kind of wanted to go with this idea that Anakin kept contacting Plo throughout the campaign on Cato Neimoidia, which is one that we see like before the temple bombing, so it's a long campaign that just doesn't really seem to end. And so I really like the idea of Anakin like calling Plo and being like, hey, like the whole Stewie thing with Lois, like kind of that thing, and eventually he's just like, what do you want, bro? Like, I'm in a battle here, like, can the voices in your head are talking to you. Don't listen to the voices in your head, bro. Like, you know, I thought that would be a funny kind of way to handle it. Also having the little fight at the end with Grand Inquisitor and some Royal Guards was just like a fun, different way to cap it off, with Palpatine trying to go a different route with Anakin after him being kind of standoffish in the executive chambers. So I hope you all enjoyed the story. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.